Now, when it comes to meatballs, every schmuck you know is gonna say, hey, I get the best fucking meatballs you ever tasted. If that's true, then why are most of them tough and taste like shit? All recipes are some variation of the same ingredients, and great meatballs are less about secret ingredients and more about procedure. How you make them, to me, is more important than what you make them with. Although ingredients are important, and in my original recipe, I just called for beef. But in this recipe, we're choosing the ideal mix. Ground beef, ground pork, ground veal. Beef acts as the base, pork acts as the flavor, veal acts as the tenderizer. Every little thing is intentional. Now, I made the original just beef because sometimes pork or veal could be harder to find, but we're in advanced mode now, so if you can't find it, try and grind it yourself. And this in total is about 1.5 pounds of meat. Usually I do 2 eggs per pound, so I need 1 more egg. And this is where the process begins, so pay attention. In this bowl, we're only gonna combine the meat and the egg. So I'm just gonna crack the eggs right into the meat. Most recipes will continue to add the rest of the ingredients to this mixture. I just work on the egg and the meat. And I'm not gonna be gentle with it. I want every fiber of that meat to be coated in that egg. One aspect of my process is the goal to ensure like an even distribution of all that beautiful flavor inside of a meatball. When you kind of just haphazardly throw all those ingredients together in a bowl and then mix it up, you get these like bland, bald spots of seasoning. And I want flavor in every inch, in every bite of the meatball. This is prepped. Now we can set this off to the side. Now we can work on something that's called a panade, but what I call a slurry, because I try to avoid esoteric cooking words. This slurry is like a flavor bomb. All the things we would have just tossed in there, we're gonna toss into here. Starts with breadcrumbs, and for this amount of mix, I'm gonna eyeball it. So let's call that 3/4 cup to a cup. I'm not gonna add too much now because I'm gonna use this in case it needs a little bit rebalancing at the end. To that, ricotta. Ricotta is another trick. I used to have like meatballs and then ricotta meatballs, but now I just started to incorporate the ricotta into my meatball mix along with the veal and pork. And I've never been happier. We're gonna go with like 2 tablespoons of that, maybe a little bit more. We're gonna have a whole discussion about tomatoes later, but for now I have this open can of some whole peeled tomatoes, and I'm gonna take the tomato puree that the whole tomatoes are sitting in. I'm just gonna add a bit to the mixture. That's going to just add some richness to the meatballs. Then of course we need the cheese, and I only use Pecorino Romano, not Parmigiano Reggiano. This is saltier, sharper, and it's just gonna go a much longer way at flavoring that meatball the way you want it to. Again, about the same as the breadcrumbs. Now, of course, we need some garlic. And one of the issues I see with garlic is either it's chopped too big so it never fully cooks through, or you use too much of it. So I'm going with 2 cloves. I'm not gonna cut it, I'm gonna grate it right in. This makes sure with a small amount of garlic, you get a lot of that garlic flavor throughout, without you ever eating the meatball at the end of the day and being like, why am I just tasting garlic, like raw, unpleasant garlic? I used to add a load of garlic, and even though the meatballs were good, it was just an unpleasant garlic background flavor that I'm trying to avoid. Starting to smell, I use my nose here, so it's starting to smell in the world of what I'm talking about. Then we just need a little bit of parsley. Bunch it all up, rock through, give it a chop. We don't want it super fine, but we don't want it too big either. I want little pepper streaks of green running throughout my meatballs. Toss that right in. And to that, we're gonna liberally season with salt, fresh cracked black pepper. But now I'm gonna take my hand, and just like we did with the meatball and egg, we're going to really grind everything in our hands. I want that flavor just kind of homogeneous throughout. But now what you can do, since there's no egg in there, you can just kind of take a little bit. And what you want it to be is like intensely seasoned, knowing that the beef is not seasoned at all. Now what we can do is take that slurry, that flavor bomb. I'm just gonna sort of break it up into the bowl. It should look almost like a tortellini filling. And once we've gotten it all broken up, again, with your hands, mix it in with all that meat. And again, we're trying to squeeze that flavor all throughout the meatball mix. And why are we making meatballs first? Because recently I made some for friends, prepped them earlier in the day, then ran out to run some errands and let them marinate in the fridge, something I had never done before. Then what I ended up serving my friends were the greatest meatballs that I've ever made. And the only difference I did was allow the meat mixture to marinate. Let the flavors come together, and that's the third trick. We're gonna let this chill in the fridge for at least an hour. Overnight would probably be better, but just some time for all this flavor and that meat to marinate. Now, that leads us to Weekday sauce. Now, my first Weekday sauce, we talked about the quality of tomatoes, but we only used one. And an advanced sauce maker knows not all tomatoes taste the same. Just like wine, where tomatoes grow affects how they taste. Now here we have the famous San Marzano tomatoes. Now, I know what you're gonna say. There's a lot of fraud out there. Look at some of these examples. They say San Marzano. You go and look for any sort of certification, and there is none. But as you can see, you can find some. These are two signs of an actual Italian product. But still, sometimes you don't know where in Italy they're actually from. What you wanna look for? Agro Sarnese San Marzano tomatoes. You wanna look for these two emblems. And then of course, you gotta try them. They could be Smell it. And if it reminds you of Italy, if you've ever been to Italy, then you know you have a good tomato. And because they're grown on the volcanic, ashy mountains of Mount Vesuvius or around it, these are intense and tangy, a little bit more acidic, and they do have like a subtle sweetness, all because of that earthy, mineral-rich land it grows on. You all know Bianco di Napoli, and these are California tomatoes. And if you know anything about California, it has the most sunny days of anywhere on earth, which is why white wines from California are some of the juiciest wines you could drink. Same goes with the tomato. Because of how sunny it is, these are gonna be a sweeter, less acidic tomato. Now, most times you're just gonna use one or the other, but when we're at an advanced level, we like to blend the two. They give us a balance of intense flavor, beautiful sweetness, and a subtle acidity that's going to just give a tomato sauce more complexity. And so besides blending these two, we're going to use a passata here, and not for flavor so much, but for consistency and texture. It's processed to be a bit more smooth and rich and creamy. And if I'm looking for that flavor profile, which most of the times I am when I'm making meatballs, I'm gonna add a little bit of this into my sauce. So first we need to puree these. And that of course brings us to a food mill, which we haven't talked about in a while, but is an essential part of good tomato sauce making. This gets the seeds and the pulp out, purees it to a nice kind of passata texture without like whipping a bunch of air into it like you tend to do when you use a blender. So I get a bowl, place the food mill over top, and then just start pouring it in. With my hand, I'm gonna just gently crush the tomatoes a little bit just to help them along the way. And as you can see, what's dripping is a bit more on the watery side, which is why that passata is kind of nice. The Biancos are in a little bit of a thicker sauce, so all this stuff is gonna just balance out. We're kind of taking the best of every tomato and applying it to our sauce. And then we just run them through. When I was a kid, I just hated chunky tomato sauce. When I discovered the food mill, I was like, this is it. Before that, I would throw it in a blender. It would come out orange. It would look like a vodka sauce. And even though it was good, it was just not what I was going for. And then when you pick the right tomatoes, you don't have to like add a bunch of sugar and onion and all this stuff that sweetens a tomato sauce. You can keep it pure and focus on the beauty of the tomatoes. One caveat to this dish is, of course, the best tomatoes are the ones you buy from the farmer's market in August and turn into sauce. Every once in a while, we go under, sort of clean out the bottom, get all that nice pulp into our sauce. And we just want to make sure we get everything out of those tomatoes as we can. Now, the one thing you'll notice is you'll see like pulp and then tomato water. Now, that'll emulsify a lot of the time when it cooks, but we're just going to add that passata, and you'll see it sort of come together a bit better. It's almost sort of like what mayo does to a sauce. So now that's nice and thick, and I've got some stuff in the cans. We're gonna fill those up with water, clean them out in the pan, but our sauce is ready to go. Next up, we've got our garlic. We're just gonna cut them in half, remove all those papers, and we're just gonna slice them thin. And then just a little basil stem, and our garlic is ready. A little chili flake if you want's fine, but ready to get this onto the stove. So we want to turn the heat on to medium-high heat and immediately add enough oil to coat the bottom of the pan, and then the garlic and basil to the cold oil, and let the oil come up to temp while that garlic and basil steep in the oil and infuse it with that flavor. The oil is the vehicle for that flavor to disperse into the tomatoes, turning canned tomatoes into a tomato sauce. Once the garlic starts to get nice and golden, then we can go ahead and add in the tomatoes. Stir it up, and then I'm gonna clean out the jars with some water, but not too much, just enough that by the time all the jars are cleaned out, it's like a thin tomato puree. Pour that in, season it with some salt, and then bring that up to a boil, and then simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes until it's an emulsified, not too thick and not too thin sauce. If it's thin, keep reducing it. If it's too thick, thin it out with some water. And while this cooks on the back burner, we're gonna get started on our meatballs. Now that right there is Weekday sauce, as close to like your family's jarred sauce as you're ever gonna get. And I stopped cooking small batches, I make big batches now. If I wasn't gonna cook with this now, I would just portion it into into like 3 quart containers and throw it in the freezer, and I've got my own custom jarred sauce ready to go whenever I need. So now the meatballs have been marinating about an hour, hour and a half. Again, the longer you do it, the better you're gonna get it. And now we can form the balls. Now for these, I'm just gonna use an ice cream scooper and oil my hands up a little bit. And I'm just gonna start to find a size I like. I don't like huge meatballs, I like small meatballs. And it's probably like 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces I like to go for. So we'll measure out a bunch. Now this mound of meat is actually for 2 recipes. One for today, and then we've got a special recipe next week. And for that, we're gonna be using this mixture for mini meatballs. So here I've got 5 big balls. This is big to me. What I wanna do is just kind of work it so that there is no seam or any kind of piece like that that's gonna kind of pull apart when it cooks. I wanna seal everything up so that's more or less a smooth ball all the way around. So use your hands as like a kind of a cup. Just roll in circles until you get a nice smooth ball. Now, of course, you would just make the rest of the meatballs. Probably make around 15 or 20 of them. But we're gonna cook these 5 off. I'm gonna take a non-stick pan and I'm gonna add about 1 inch of olive oil to it. I'm gonna bring it up to a frying temperature, and then we're gonna add in the meatballs, making sure you never overcrowd them. We're gonna let them cook on one side and make sure we get a nice deep brown on that first side. Peek one under, that's nice and browned, but I'm going for a deeper brown than that, so I'm gonna let the next one go a little bit longer. Just kind of use a tongue to roll it onto its other side, and that's a nice deep golden brown. Turn all the rest, brown on that second side, and then just try and get them as completely brown as you can. You don't have to go too crazy, but know that the darker you go is fine, because all that deep color gets diminished the longer it stays in a sauce. Once they're brown, transfer them into the tomato sauce. And this is another secret. A lot of people cook their meatballs forever. We're cooking them for exactly 1 hour. Now this video is near and dear to my heart because 17 years ago when I first started cooking, the first 2 things I cared to really crack the code on is tomato sauce and meatballs. Shortly after that, about 15 years ago when blogging was a thing, there's actually an archived version of my old blog, The Food Freak, which documented my very first version of tomato sauce. Fast forward 8 years from that.
Today marks the 3-month anniversary of Not Another Cooking Show.
When I first started this channel, and I uploaded the evolution of that sauce, Weekday sauce, which has become a staple and core recipe of everything we do on this channel. The first sauce was born out of ignorance, me thinking I know everything. The second sauce was born out of humility, meaning the more I knew, the more I realized I didn't know. And at that point, my life fell apart. I started from scratch in almost every sense of the word. So I stripped away all preconceptions about cooking and Italian food and began the learning process as if I knew nothing, which would be the foundation that would allow me to go build this channel. Before I could teach you anything, I needed to become the student and unlearn bad habits. Now, fast forward another 7 years to today, and my cooking ability is on another level than it was. So I want to take that 17-year journey of these 2 recipes and share with you all the tricks and techniques on how to make the actual greatest meatballs you ever had that no other video is going to share with you. So now there's about 7 minutes left. That's it. You could have even cooked these for less, but cooking them longer runs the risk of drying them out. This idea of you cook your meatballs for 3 hours, like, yeah, they're great. They remind me of my grandma's meatballs. A little dry, but deep flavor, like, I get it. But you don't have to. If you're making like a Sunday sauce and you want to overcook your sausage, let that go further. If you're making short ribs or ribs, throw those in. They're gonna take 3 hours. So those cook, and then the meatballs hang on the side, and then you just add them for that last hour and they're ready to go. So now what we have here is meatball sauce. It was Weekday sauce, we added meatballs to it. That makes it meatball sauce, changes the flavor profile. If we added sausage to this, it would be Sunday sauce light. And then if we added pork ribs or short ribs or braciole, you've got full Sunday sauce. The aroma reminds me of tomato sauces I've tasted in Italy. The look and the color, it's a beautiful, perfect red. It's not pink, it's not deep and like kind of caramelized tomato sauce. It's light and fresh. And their meatball, just by feeling it, soft. You get a gauge, it's not tough and tight. Now we're just gonna form a little bit of a meatball tower on the plate. Just a nice, simple presentation. To that, we're going to make sure we get a good amount of sauce, because with meatballs, you need to soak it up in a lot of that sauce. Finish with some baby basil leaves, and then of course, some Parmigiano Reggiano. And my friends, this is what perfect meatballs and sauce looks like. Master these 2 things, and you eat good for life. I will say there is a limit to how tender you want a meatball. I've tried to add baking soda before, and it became like the same texture as Chinese takeout. Too soft. This is the perfect texture. You can feel your teeth bite through something, but there is zero resistance when you do. It's got flavor, it's not overwhelming garlic. This is my life's work. There's no excuse for you to have bad meatballs anymore. Now, like I said, next episode, we're taking these meatballs and that sauce and we're turning it into sarto di riso, a real old Timbalo Neapolitan recipe, which is essentially an arancini cake stuffed with Neapolitan ragu. What's better than that? And now you can't take my word for these meatballs. You're gonna have to give them a shot. Recipe's gonna be down in the description and I want you to tell me what you think. Otherwise, that's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.
Make sure you come back next time because, you know, who knows what we could be making.